On behalf of three boards, the WSESD, the WSESU, and Vernon, this meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public body is meeting remotely and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location, where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. We will do our very best to keep everyone connected. If there is a problem, please alert someone in this space via email. Regardless, the meeting will continue. Thank you. So, taking a look at the agenda, I'd just like to make a couple of sort of business level announcements. For the SD board and for the for all three boards, September 13th, Friday, is the deadline to register for the VSBA annual conference. This is a deadline that Mohart and I worked out. The stipulation is that you yourself register for the conference. This is the end of October. Alert me, alert Mo, and allow Mo to make a hotel reservation that Thursday night into Friday. I do believe it's October 24 to 25, and it's through the VSBA. And then for the SD board, just to let you know, the next board meeting that we have is on September 24, and perhaps it's unknown to some vital people in this room, but the schedule says we will be at Putney Central School. Okay, thank you. As we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the construct of this meeting, which represents a coalition of the three boards and administration. It has been organized so that the continuous improvement plan is presented in one sitting to all three boards. And on behalf of the WSESD board, we will evaluate this presentation. We will evaluate the continuous improvement plan at our next board meeting on September 24th. We also, all of us, appreciate the opportunity to actively engage with all the boards, Vernon, the SU, and the SD. So, thank you very much. We look forward to 2 additional summits as the year progresses. And regarding the consent agreement, unless there is a need for discussion, the WSESD, and I'm not sure if Vernon does this in the same way. Okay, let me leave Vernon out. The WSD handles the consent agenda with one motion. If there is an issue with the consent agenda, please let the board know before we get to that point. I am going to move to the next moment in the agenda, which is student matters. It's time for students to indicate concerns, comments that they might have. I don't know if we have any students online. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't see any hands up. So again, this is a moment for student voices. Okay. We are going to move on to public comment on non-agenda items. And before I turn it over to Walter, I would like to read a statement. As of today, I appreciate that the political campaign banners have been taken down. Nevertheless, as the board chair of our district, I must acknowledge the harm that has been done to our community. 6 days ago, on the morning of Thursday, September 5, it was brought to my attention that Trump and Harris political campaign banners were placed internally against the library windows of the Dummerston School. They were visually evident to anyone driving past the school. I immediately contacted the superintendent, expressing my concern that these optics placed this elementary school in a potentially dangerous spotlight. The superintendent acknowledged my concern and said he would look into it immediately, even to go to the school. On Friday, the next day, September 6th, the banners were still evident. At approximately 3:30 Friday afternoon, I was on speakerphone with both the superintendent and the principal. I was repeatedly told that this represents an excellent educational opportunity, given that we are engaged in a national election. My role as an elected board director is not to question curriculum. Once again, I made it clear that my concern was with the optics as individuals drove past the school. My request was simple: that the banners be placed internal to the school and not in the windows of the library, evident to anyone driving past. I was told that this request would not be honored. Although I was invited to have a conversation with the teacher, I immediately replied that it was inappropriate and unprofessional for any elected board director to engage in a conversation about curriculum. 6 days ago, the WSESD board chair presented these concerns. I appreciate that today the political campaign banners have been removed from the windows of the library. I would like this statement to be included in the minutes.
May I make a comment?
I have a comment.
Excuse me, this is public comment period.
I would just clarify, I don't believe they have been removed, so I just wanted to clarify that.
They have not been removed.
That's my understanding. They
Okay,
have
so
not.
be it, so be it. So 6 days later, the banners are still up. Thank you for that clarification. Walter, there are hands, board hands. May I continue?
Please.
Okay, thank you. Eva Nolan.
I would like to just put on the record that I was the one that called Deborah on Thursday morning. I drove by and saw the political flags in the window. I let the board chair know immediately, and I told her about the impact of the harm to BIPOC students and my concern. And she was excellent, and she did everything in her power to handle the situation. On Thursday evening, the flags were still up. I called the chair again, and she told me that she would be discussing it further on Friday. On Friday evening, Deborah told me that the decision was made by the superintendent and the principal that the flags will remain.
Okay, I'm opening this up to public comment. Jody Normando, would you identify yourself and your town, please?
Jody Normando, Dummerston. I drove by the school at 11:30 this morning, and there were no flags visible where they were yesterday.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jody, for that clarification. I see another hand up. Windham County NAACP, would you identify yourself, please, and your town?
Yes, Laura Chapman, and my town is Putney, Vermont. First, I'd like to thank you for your statement, Chair Stanford. It's much appreciated. I'm so sorry that we're even having this conversation. I would like to read into the record a letter from the president of our local NAACP branch, WeCR2. He can't be here tonight. As the secretary of the branch, he's asked me to read this. Dear school boards, it's been less than a year since I've become president of our local NAACP branch. Since then, many parents of BIPOC children have contacted me to tell me their child is thinking of suicide, or that they are pulling their kid from school, or they are thinking of suing a school. I've heard so many horrifying experiences that I can even recreate for you what happens in the life of a BIPOC student. You wake up to hear the news talk about a presidential candidate allegedly saying in an interview, laziness is a trait in Blacks. Interview with Jack O'Donnell. On your way into school, you see the same presidential candidate's campaign flag hanging in the public-facing library window, Dummerston Elementary. In class, you're forced to play a slave in your class's Civil War role play activity, Mount Anthony High School, Bennington. In another class, your classmate calls you the N-word, Twin Valley School, Whitingham. As you sit on the bus after school, you notice and stare at the swastika flag flying across the street from your school, Leland and Gray, Townsend. At home, you overhear your parents exclaim that your teachers are wondering if they are allowed to include in their curriculum that our founding fathers had slaves while they preached about liberty, Springfield School District. Before going to bed, you hear of your friend who just committed suicide because of racial bullying, Keene, New Hampshire. All of these incidents on their own can be reasoned as fake news, freedom of speech, civics education, a person who complains too much, something that was out of your hands, or an unfortunate incident where kids were being kids. But it is not that one incident, that one time in that random place that we're trying to address. It's the culmination of incidents every day in our life that weaves the fabric of the society where we exist. If we were to compare a person's resilience to a piece of clothing, we could similarly reason that it cannot necessarily be ruined by pulling one loose strand. But when you pull one loose strand day after day, that piece of clothing becomes unstable and is no longer strong enough to hold itself together. Something small happening every day to you or around you can break even the toughest of hearts. I know that personally. I ask that when decisions are made or discussed, that instead of arguing on its legality or its intention, we argue on the impact of that decision on those we wish to serve, given the context in which we exist. The display of the political flag happened. It was another day in the life of a BIPOC student. Tomorrow hasn't happened yet, though. Will it be any different than yesterday? In full solidarity with our BIPOC students, WeCR2 President, Windham County NAACP. And he adds that he's always available to have further conversations. Feel free to email him at president@windhamnaacp.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Jody Normando, I see your hand up.
I never took it down, sorry.
Okay, all right. Yes, would you identify yourself and your town, please?
Sure. My name's Eileen Hayes Aroma, and I am the parent of a daughter at the UHS, and I work at BAMS as a school social worker. And I thank you for bringing that to our attention. I have an issue that's a little different, but similar. And I'll read it because I always get tongue-tied if I don't read something. So I'm glad to have finally attended a social justice committee meeting. Last month, I asked what we are doing as a district to confront the rise of anti-Semitism. I have another question. Is there a curriculum for teaching middle schoolers about the Holocaust and about the history of the Jewish people? Are our students learning about the previous risings of anti-Semitism? Would the history of the Jewish people help students understand the current challenges? One of our goals as a nation and a state and a district is to help students develop critical thinking. Critical thinking is defined as the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment. Effective problem solving is the cornerstone of critical thinking. It requires the ability to identify issues, generate possible solutions, evaluate alternatives, and implement the best course of action. Polarized thinking is the tendency to think in extremes. This type of thinking can prevent you from recognizing subtle details that could be crucial to solving issues effectively. This thought pattern, which the American Psychological Association also calls dichotomous or polarized thinking, is considered a cognitive distortion because it keeps us from seeing the world as it often is, complex, nuanced, and full of all the shades in between. That's from healthline.com. Almost all Americans recognize the role of polarized or dichotomous thinking in our culture and our politics. I recognize it in many current political challenges. What is not good must be evil. I recognize it in the anti-Semitic tropes used to vilify the Jews prior to the Holocaust and the tropes used against Israel, Israelis, Jews, and Zionists everywhere now. So again, I ask, if we can explore the teaching of the history of the Jewish people and the rise of anti-Semitism prior to the Holocaust that mirrors what we are seeing today. Friends and I have compiled a list of curricula to explore. There are numerous sources here in Vermont that could guide our work teaching children to recognize issues, generate solutions, evaluate alternatives, and seek the best course forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So Jody, I still see your hand up. I do believe, I don't know whether, okay, now it just went down. All right. Any other comment during this period? Julianne, please
Yeah.
identify yourself.
Sure.
Yes.
Julianne Egan, Dummerston School Principal. I'd like to just clarify a couple of things. There are 2 signs hanging up on the inside of the library. The bottom UNP and RIS are visible from the road. I would be happy to communicate with any community members about our vision for learning at Dummerston School, including our commitment to students engaging in current events, civic discourse, civic responsibility, perspective taking, deep listening, working to understand each other, and coming together to carry out shared goals. An election is taking place, and our work as educators is to empower our students to understand their world. This work is grounded in state and national teaching standards. I am the Dummerston School Principal. I am the principal of all students. I am the principal of students who are transgender, students who are BIPOC, students who have disabilities, students who are Christian, students who are Jewish, students who are atheists, students who are unhoused, students whose families will vote for Trump, students whose families will vote for Harris, and students whose families will not vote at all. They all belong at Dummerston School. I love, deeply love, and support them all. As many of you know, I was trained as a social studies educator at UMass Amherst and then taught social studies and English for 15 years. I often ask myself, how can I be as brave as I ask my students to be every day? I'm asking this question of myself tonight, right now. For now, I will simply tell you that I believe in dialogue and ask that community members reach out to me with questions about our work at Dummerston School. Also, as a reminder, according to district policy and our teacher's contract, the process for complaints is to bring the concern to the teacher, then the principal, then the superintendent, then the board. As of tonight, I have not received any complaints from any Dummerston School family member or any member of the Dummerston School staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, please identify yourself, name and town. Thank you.
Good evening. Hello. My name is Martha Noyce, and I'm a resident and property owner here in Brattleboro. My purpose this evening is to, again, ask the WSESD district board members, directors, you here this evening, to begin to have conversations about the upcoming school budget. Have you talked amongst yourselves? Have you talked amongst various committees? Individuals who voted and elected you to this very important position? Where can we cut back? Where can we consolidate? Where can we compromise? Are we being creative? Are there sacrifices that we might make? And might we just have to say no? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I see your hand, Laura. Please identify yourself and your town.
Laura Chapman Putney, and I'm speaking just for myself right now. And I'd like to respond to the principal's statement. As a Putney resident, I'm appalled. I do understand civic education and I appreciate civic education, but my child and every child coming into these schools has had to sign an anti-bullying statement. And Donald Trump is a bully. That flag is the flag of a bully. And common decency should not allow it to hang in a school window, much less on a school wall. But you know what? I probably wouldn't have had a problem with it. The fact is, it's not just about Dummerston parents or children anymore because it was put in a window for all the public to view. So I'm here to officially let you know that I have a real problem with a bully's flag being hung in the window of any school in our district. And Dummerston is a part of our district. We all merged. We're all in this together. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Laura.
I have to say something that I didn't want to say. As somebody who's been hauled to an 8 o'clock meeting because there was vandalism at Putney Central School over a political issue, how very frightened we all were for the students because the person who did it had a visible gun in his waistband, I would prefer that we, in the future, do not mark the schools in this manner because we are endangering our students. The person who solves their problem at the end of a spray paint can or worse will only see the sign that they object to. Please, let's keep our schools and our children safe from nuts. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I see Jody Normando's hand up. And then, yes.
I wasn't going to speak again, but I am a community member in Dummerston. And I am, like Anne, very concerned about the nutcases anywhere in the world and what they are doing to our children. I would not like to see those signs, no matter what political side they are, put out in the front window. I don't have any problem with their being taught in the classroom and inside the school where they're not visible for the rest of the world to see. Of course, I understand that one of these candidates is a bully and obnoxious in so many ways. It's hurtful and it's hateful. But I thought the signs were taken down because they weren't there when I came through at 11:30. But if they're still there, I would really ask Julianne to see. I don't think I need to go to the teacher. I'm not a parent anymore. My two children and my two grandchildren have been to the school. It's a wonderful school. And I hate to see its name in the headlines for these kinds of reasons. I am a big promoter of civics in the schools. We have not had it for years as much. I know Dummerston has had it for quite a long time, but we don't have it in high school anymore. And it is a very important class to have. It's important for everybody to have it. We don't know what's going on anymore in the political world. So I would go along with everybody who's asking that at least these flags or whatever they are be put in a different, if they're not already, be put in a different part of the library. I have no problems. The kids have seen these flags everywhere. I have no problem with their being used in the civics part of it. But at least don't put them in the window or put the shades down and have them on top of the shades so they are not publicly seen by every nutcase that drives by, and we have a lot of them. Thank you. And I'll try to lower my hand this time.
Mark Spino.
Yeah, I'll just say it's, the election is polarizing. It's going to be polarizing. We should anticipate in the months ahead many more discussions like this in our schools, and we have to be prepared to work with our students and families through issues like this. At the same time, all voices are important, and we need to lean into what everybody is sharing with us from all perspectives. I don't want to speak for the teacher, so I won't, but I do believe that the teacher's intentions are well, and that they are to teach the school community about the election and the election process. Couple points of clarification. Deborah, I thought our conversation on Friday was a really insightful conversation. I want to be defensive, but we did not make a decision as we closed that phone call. What we shared is that we would share the optics concern with the teacher at the school. Another point, the flags, they are hung on the wall in the interior of the classroom for the unit of study that she is teaching. Unfortunately, a portion of the signs can be seen from the road. And I understand the concerns that have been raised and the points that have been raised. I think that is a very quick fix. At the same time, I also think it is important that we teach current events and what's happening. And if I'm a child and I'm watching the news, depending on the channel I'm watching, I'm getting a much different perspective. So as educators, it is our role to teach current events and to teach from the middle and to share facts and to encourage students to be their own problem solvers and thinkers. And I know for a fact that is what we are committed to as a school system. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mark. Tim, please identify yourself.
Tim Maciel, Brattleboro. Mark, I haven't heard anybody object to the lesson being taught. What I don't understand is, what is the reason that the flags haven't been blocked from view from the road. Is that part of the lesson? I just don't get that part.
Well, I guess I could just answer, I guess I would ask, is that our practice to remove all curriculum artifacts and materials from windows? You know what I mean? So it's,
Yeah, you know,
yeah,
Brattleboro has an ordinance against any political campaigning posters and such being posted in a public place. Just can't be done. I understand that Dummerston doesn't have this any kind of ordinance like that. It's up to the school. But what I don't understand, I think we all agree that civics, of course, is critically important. I'm a champion of civics education. I hope it continues to be done well. What I don't understand is why a simple solution, blocking it from view from the road, wasn't taken 6 days ago. That's a practical, pragmatic, and safety issue that has been emphasized so well. I just don't get it really. It's a simple solution. Block the flags from being seen from the road.
Thank you. I'm looking at the screen. Is there anyone else who would like to make a statement at this time? A comment? Jody?
Me again. I'll just reiterate, I think, and what Tim said, it's a simple solution to just move those from the library windows. And I know the library, there are other places they could be put or shown. I don't understand why the board, the administration, the principal, or the teacher, who I know knows about these complaints, don't just do it if it hasn't been all done. And I would suggest that something does get done, because I do not want to see what's happening in other schools across the country. And it's not, Vermont is not involved in this, because for years there have been shootings in schools in Vermont. And it could happen. I don't want to see it happen. Dummerston has been my school since 1970 in one way or another. And the kids are all my kids. And I really do not want to see this happen. And I don't think the teacher does either. She is a very good teacher. She's an excellent teacher. And so I have no problems with the civics. But damn it, just get rid of those flags. Thank you.
I'll just say there's other
Wait one
things we get
second.
asked to
Let me-
remove. Yeah.
Let's just, let's not have an exchange going back and forth.
Mhm.
So, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I was just saying,
Okay.
just for people to, I think all the principals can speak to this, we get asked to remove things. Like, if that happens on a, semi-regular basis, not frequently, but we get asked to remove things that people find that they don't want to be seen, right? So I'm just asking you to consider that as we think about the full spectrum of all of the things that we really make visible to our community. And so my response to, when I get asked around is to say very similar thing to what I said at this meeting. As to why, what our education is, what we're doing with our education, what our vision for education is, and why that is connected to our curriculum. So I just put that out there because when people ask, well, why isn't it just removed, or why? I mean, these are the questions that social studies teachers wrestle with every day, all the time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Laura?
Thanks. I do want to say that, like, I really do appreciate good civics lessons, and I am sure that this is a wonderful teacher and that this is a wonderful principal. But I don't understand how flag paraphernalia, how a banner for anybody is a part of a civics lesson. Like, these aren't allowed in polling places. They're not required for teaching children. Just because children have seen them outside of a school doesn't mean they should be inside of a school. And this is a school that has, I believe, 4-year-olds through 13-year-olds. I don't understand how a 4-year-old benefits from having political flags hanging in their library. I don't get it.
Final word, I'll just say, it's important.
Mark Spina.
It's important to listen to all voices. We've heard a lot of passionate responses tonight, and we'll move forward.
Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment?
Question?
I'm sorry, yes, Tim.
What do you mean we'll move forward? How so?
Process this feedback, consult with the teacher, and make a decision. I have an opinion of what that decision should be. I'm not going to share that right now.
Yes, I'm sorry. Kathleen? Would you identify yourself by first name, last name, and where you're from, please?
My name is Kathleen Sullivan.
I think you have to really project out.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm Kathleen Sullivan, and I'm a parent of 2 kids at Brattleboro Central School. And I also happen to be a social work student, which is why I'm here. As a parent and just someone who is deeply concerned about school shootings, in light of the one that happened last week in Georgia, this is extremely serious. And so I just want to agree with the statements that were made, just imploring this teacher and principal to reconsider the safety of children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I realize that we have a packed agenda this evening, but this is a serious matter. So once again, is there anyone who would like to make a comment at this time? I do think that this is a very focused issue having to do with political campaign banners and not having to do with curriculum at all. And I am concerned for the passage of time. And it is not just about one campaign banner. It is about all campaign banners. Once again, is there anyone else who would like to make a comment?
I just have a question.
Go right, identify yourself, please.
Eva Nolan, school board member. Are the flags still up? That's my question. Are they still up?
Yes.
I think that was answered
I
earlier.
understand, yeah.
They are still up.
So after everything, 6 days, conversations today, this posting on the Facebook, the flags are still up. Where do we go from here? I talked to Deborah and told her, this was the day after the shooting. I told her about my concerns. And we are now on Tuesday evening, and the flags still remain. I don't know where we go from here.
As I just shared, I think it's pretty clear where we go from here. And that is to process all of this information and have it reflected in a decision tomorrow morning. And I will just say thank you, and I appreciate your feedback. It is important that we don't get defensive, people don't get defensive. Take it, use it, and make a decision moving forward.
I do want to reiterate, this is day 6 after I was alerted to this issue, and day 6. Eva Nolan.
Just because you can do it, just because you're allowed to do it by the ordinance doesn't mean you should. And sometimes we need to take a step back and look at the situation. And if 2 people are telling you this is an issue, please listen. That's it. I have no further comment.
I just want to add to that comment that it's more than 2 people, many more than 2 people. So
Excuse me, Deborah.
sorry, I can't. Michelle, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Would you identify yourself and your town, please?
Yeah, Michelle Green Demerston, and I apologize. I can't for the life of me figure out how to raise my hand on my telephone on Zoom.
That's okay.
I came into the conversation late. I was aware of the situation and saw the Facebook post. I understand. I'm just going to take a guess at what some of the things were talked about, because I understand that sort of visceral reaction we're having right now, a lot of us in our community, to certain types of conversations and to rhetoric that doesn't support inclusivity and safety. And I just wanted to share my thought as a member of the Demerston Leadership Council, and I'm co-chairing until this Thursday when we establish the next chair, that I feel like this is an opportunity where we turn to our leadership councils who work closely with our staff and our principals to discuss these things and to establish within the school and our school values, and to take a consensus of how we feel, and to let our educators work with their actual leadership council and their community to take steps forward, and their staff. And so I just wanted to put that out for consideration. It's not too late for this to be added to our agenda for our meeting on Thursday. I'm sure that Julianne would have reported to us anyway. But I think that just having the parents that are involved and the community members involved that are so dedicated and actively working with our teachers and our principal, that this would be a good place to allow a greater team of representation to come together and really try to understand the issue and to consider what's best for our school community, and make a decision together that feels safest for everyone. That's all. Thank you.
As we consider the effect that campaign banners have on individuals, regardless of who they are, it can be traumatizing for individuals. And it can create unsafe spaces for the children that we are responsible for. And for the adults who take care of their children, of our children. So, I appreciate the value of time. I also appreciate how damaging this situation is. And we are in day 6 since I've become aware as a board chair of this situation. All right, I don't see any more hands. Is there anyone in the space who has anything to add in the moment? Okay. I'm moving on to the next moment in the agenda, which is the approval of warrants for Windham Southeast School District. Is there a motion to approve the warrant? I'm sorry, Sean Murphy.
Yes, I move that the warrants be passed.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, we have a second from Kim Price. Any discussion?
There's,
Tim.
yeah, I'll bring this up now. There's an item in the warrants. I encourage everybody to read those warrants. It was for $1,500 for a custom-made cornhole with the Bears logo. You know, it's a small $1,500 in a $65 million budget, may not seem much. But I think we should take note of things like this and really try to trim the budget as we've been urged to do so. Maybe there's good reason for $1,500 for a cornhole with the Bears logo, but couldn't we make that kind of thing at the Career Center? Those are the kinds of things. I don't want to discuss the cornhole set now, but isn't that the type of thing that we should be cognizant of?
Thank you, Tim. Sean Murphy.
Yeah, point of order. We had a discussion right at the beginning about consent agenda. Nothing was said, so it's totally, it's not correct parliamentary procedure at all.
Okay, I'm not hearing necessarily that it was going to be pulled from this, from the motion. So, can I just clarify, are you looking to pull that warrant from the motion?
No.
Okay, it was a point of discussion, not to pull it from, the warrant. So I appreciate the technicality, Sean. But I need to open it up for discussion. Okay, I see another hand, Ruby.
Just another point of order. I think the point is that if it's a consent agenda, there is no discussion.
I see, sorry.
It's just a vote.
Okay, thank you very much for that correction. Okay, so consent agenda, no discussion. We're not pulling anything from it. I heard nothing before. I have a motion, it's been seconded. This is the SD board only. All those in favor of approving this consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye, raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed, please indicate by saying no and raising your hand. Any abstentions? Thank you, consent agenda has been passed. I'm turning it over to the Vernon School Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've received from central office 2 sets of warrants and payrolls, one dated August 23rd, 2024, one dated September 6th, 2024. So we've all had time to review. I would entertain a motion to approve the warrants and payrolls for those 2 dates. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? The warrants and payrolls pass.
So now we are up to public pre-K partnership approvals.
Hi there, I'm Carrie Beebe, and I'm the PreK coordinator, and this is just the time that the board, the chair and the clerk sign our agreements with our PreK partners. And I'm really, many of you know about the PreK partners. We have 14 of them in our Windham County, Windham Southeast District, and it is through Act 66 that families are able to receive 10 hours of free quality pre-K experience. And I'm not sure what else to say or share. I know this is a packed agenda, and I'm not really, I don't have a spiel to say, but I certainly could answer any questions or have you sign.
Just as a point of information,
Yes.
would you read the names of the preschools, please? And then we are able to sign them.
Sure.
Thank you.
So we have them for the Windham Southeast District and then Windham Southeast for the Vernon too. So we have for the Windham Southeast School District, Tinson Hope Preschool, Miss Martha's Creative Learning Program, the Grammar School, Winston Crowley Center for Child Development, the Garland School, Owl's Nest Family Preschool and Childcare, Hilltop Montessori School, Brattleboro Center for Children, Windham Southeast Supervisory District at Birch Street, Town of Vernon Preschool, Horizon Early Learning Center, Westby Nursery School, Horizon Early Learning Program at DBA Mulberry Bush Early Learning Center, and the Neighborhood Schoolhouse. That is for the Windham Southeast District, and then should I do the Windham Southeast Supervisory Union too? Same time?
Please.
Yeah.
Just 1 minute.
Do you want to do this tomorrow? They aren't on my agenda for tomorrow because they didn't come to me until today. So
Well, can you amend the agenda?
you can amend the agenda. So
For
we'll do
tomorrow.
the supervisor union tomorrow.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. All right. So is there a motion for approval?
So
moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Okay, and unless there is a point of order discussion? Yes,
I think it's-
Matt Chibley.
I think it is fantastic that the district is partnering with so many diverse early childhood education centers. So congratulations, thank you to the district.
It's really great, yeah.
Okay.
We have some great partners.
Great.
Thank
Any
you.
other comments? All right. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Please indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Good. Okay. And we are now up to administrative report.
Okay, there are no new hires or resignations at this time. So that brings us to our presentation on our continuous improvement plan and how we will invest in carrying it out. Bree, do you mind pulling it up on the screen?
I think you need to share screen on Zoom too. Is that right, Peter?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Right, so first and foremost, would like to thank everybody for being here tonight at our first ever summit of our supervisory union. I would like to thank all of you for embracing the concept of trying something new and embracing what is hopefully innovation. Tonight, we have a representative admin group who will be doing tonight's presentation. As shared at our last admin meeting, I encourage other administrators to feel comfortable jumping in and assisting on slides. Also, as we get started, I anticipate that there will be many questions, comments, and conversations to be had about the presentation and the different elements of the presentation. I know often in presentations like this, there may be a question, but then the answer may be on 3 slides later. So I would encourage folks to, as you're hearing the presentation and you have a question or a comment that you want to make or a wonder, to jot that down or type it into your notes. And then at the very end of the presentation, we'll have time for as many questions, comments, or discussion topics that there may be. But I think embracing that type of style will get us efficiently through quite a few slides and quite a bit of information. So I encourage you to take notes as we move along. So next slide. So this will be the 3rd year in a row that we have worked under a board calendar of presentations to help provide information to school boards and the community. And what is so nice about a calendar is it gives the administrative team time to thoughtfully pull together relevant information and present it in a concise way for the school boards and the school community. So this school year, we're taking a little bit different approach based on feedback from various board members. As you all know, we've talked about this, we'll approach the year with essentially 1 presentation a month, followed by board business at a board meeting. And of course, there will be time for follow-up questions to presentations as well. So we have organized the board calendar. Administrators have signed up for different presentations throughout the year. We've in fact started developing slides for those presentations so that admin collaborative teams can work on those presentations throughout the school year. So that's a new development for us in terms of how we're working more efficiently. And I will plan to be a part of all of those presentations moving forward. As you hear tonight's presentation and future presentations, I would ask that you think about how does the budget reflect the material that we're presenting, the systems, the professional development that we're presenting. Not only our current budget, but also as we anticipate building a new budget for the next school year, and as well as previous budgets, because a lot of the work that you're going to see here tonight is many years of development. And we have been so fortunate to have very supportive school boards to embrace and present our budgets to our communities over the years with great success. So I think that is a testament to our school system and to our school boards, not only currently, but for years past. What you'll see tonight is a lot of data. I want to provide a little bit of context. You know this, but I think it's important to say it out loud. And that is really to consider the challenges that all educators have faced over the last 4 years. And you'll see those challenges reflected in our data, which is looks much different than prior to 2020. So challenges that you know of, but I'll say them out loud, that we're facing, still facing, is the aftermath of COVID, of the shutdown, of school closures, of remote learning, of teacher and administrative turnover, of truancy at the employment level as well as the student level, and big picture, the reestablishment of engagement. Not only student engagement, staff engagement, parent engagement. We've gone through a roller coaster over the last 4 years, when overnight we were shut down. What I think you'll also see in this presentation throughout the night, and something I'm extremely proud of, is the dedication of this school system in making data-driven decisions and developing systems over time to support students and to communicate with families. I think you'll see plenty of evidence of that. And that's not just work that has happened in the last 3 years, it's been reinvented in the last 3 years based on those challenges I just shared. But it's a continuation of work of many years. So before I turn it over to Bryn for the next slide, I just want to emphasize that I am proud of our school system, what we have developed. I think we should all be proud of being a part of this system. And we're going to look at some real data tonight. And we're also going to look at systems, professional development that we've identified to shoot that data in a better trajectory. Given that, I'll turn it over to Bryn to talk a bit about the creation of a CIP and the process of what that looks like.
Hi, everyone. So CIP is a continuous improvement plan. Previous iterations of that had been the Green Mountain Star Plan or a district action plan. And now, under the guidance of the Agency of Education in Vermont, we're really embracing this term continuous improvement plan because improvement is not linear. And even if we meet our goals, we still want to improve. And so thinking of that as kind of a circular motion, I think is a helpful frame for our CIP or our continuous improvement plan work. We call it our CIP because it's a lot of words to say. So I just want to orient us briefly to what is the process typically that we are using to draft our CIP. It's not someone in an office who makes up some goals and says, okay, there it is. So I want to briefly walk you through kind of the 5 big steps that we use to draft and adopt and then continue to monitor and adapt our continuous improvement plan. And we'll dive in depth for each one of those goals as we talk about our CIP for this year. So as Mark was mentioning, we start with data. We want to see what is going really well, and specifically we want to look at what we call our problems of practice. What is not going well yet? To borrow your words, Kim, we want to see what's the bad and the ugly as well as the good, right? And so we look in depth throughout the school year. We look at our problems of practice, but in a very focused way when we start getting data back, especially in the spring. We do a deep dive at the school level, at our administration level, through conversations with boards and stakeholders, our leadership councils, to understand what are some of the problems of practice that are happening in our districts, in our schools. And we really start with that data lens to see where are we at. Obviously, there are many, many things that are happening, both good and that have room for improvement, and so we really try to hone in on what might give us the most impact in terms of student learning and helping our systems thrive. After identifying those problems of practice, we develop a theory of action, and John Sessions will talk to us a little bit more about okay, so what is that theory of action and how do we use that to propel our goal setting in the district? Once we develop some theories of actions, we create SMART goals. Some of you may have heard of that acronym before, but SMART goals are specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're relevant to our systems, and they're also time-bound, so we can really track our progress toward these goals over time. They help us hone and be really specific versus kind of these amorphous goals that can be more difficult to attain. Once we have our overarching goals, we develop some action items. And when we met as a board and admin retreat in June, we came with the SMART goals that had been developed and drafted and looked at a whole slew of action items and then worked together to try to identify which action items do we think will have a big impact now. Once we identify our action items to help us meet our SMART goals, we also think about how does that look different for Putney versus Dummerston versus a PreK program versus the high school versus the career center, and start to differentiate and target those actions at each of our buildings. And then probably the most important piece is that we monitor and adjust. It's not a static plan, it's not done forever. It's a plan to guide our action that we look at. We track our progress over time and we adjust and tweak things as needed, so it's a cycle. It's not just created and done. So that's kind of the background of our continuous improvement process. It is a requirement of the Agency of Education. It is paperwork that we do and submit to the agency. It has to be approved. But I'm happy to say it's really a propelling force to guide our instruction and ultimately benefit our system and our students. So that's kind of the overview of what the CIP is. So we'll dive in with starting with our data.
So as we develop our work and our plans and our goals, we can never lose sight of an essential question, the why behind the work. Why are we doing this? What's the point? Well, clearly, our why is the children, the students in our schools, the families that support the children in the schools, in our greater community. Number one factor in student growth and development is collective efficacy. If we all collectively believe in our students that they can achieve, then the percentages of them reaching those goals are much higher. So that is an important thing that we talk about day in and every day in and day out. Step number one is believing in your kids and letting them know that they see that and they feel that. So first bullet, we believe that all students can achieve high levels of learning and growth. Well, we also believe that students deserve to achieve high levels of learning and growth. And not all on the same pathway. We're all individuals. We all learn at different rates, but we all need someone to believe in us. Number two, our CIP helps us to set targeted goals, measure them, reflect, and continue to improve. Again, it's really easy to get distracted in education. There's so many things going on in our schools and in our school days, as you can imagine. So keeping our work focused on targeted goals is essential in moving us forward, so we don't get bogged down in the distractions. Point number three, focusing on a few targeted common goals. This big picture approach really helps with culture and building the culture of a school community and a school system community. It's very powerful to have the same language across schools. And for teachers across schools to be able to articulate what our big item goals are, that is a really powerful thing. And I experienced that last year in going to many data meetings throughout the school system. Every data team could articulate what the SU CIP big picture goals were. And that was a really powerful thing. And that continues to be a goal for this year that you'll see in our plan. Lastly, the CIP is based on not only data, but feedback from those in our schools closest to the needs of our students, our teachers. We have hard data, we also have reflection, and we also have information that our teachers tell us. So those are the four pillars of how we approach this big work, and most importantly, always being able to articulate the why behind the work that we're doing. So we'll go to Whitney.
Okay, we're gonna jump in with our first step and look at some not so pretty ugly data. And this is a slide that we've all seen at like our admin board retreat. This is not new information, but I think it's important to really talk about for a minute. And there's a link there on the slide where it says data look. That's a live link to a document where we are collecting data over the course of the whole school year as we get it from different measures. That's going in there. Something new and exciting this year is that that's actually, we're starting to develop that for each school site. Bryn has made templates for each of the school sites, and so now we will have our district data look, and then individual sites will also be developing their own data look. So that's something new that I think will be helpful, especially as schools work on their individual goals. This print is small up there. You all have it printed out, but I just want to read a couple of these. I usually try to bring like lightness and positivity to what I do, but this slide there's a level of seriousness that really resonates for me when I look at this and I see that 10 to 20% of students across schools are missing more than 15 days of schools, and that was as of March. So not even the end of the school year. So our absentee rates are high. When we look at our graduation rates, 64% of kids who dropped out are on IEPs. That's a crisis in my mind. That students are reporting low levels of kindness among peers. That while some of our VTCAP scores are increasing, our achievement gap is also slightly increasing. So that means that our kids that we are most concerned about aren't necessarily making that same growth. And so these are all elements that we need to make sure we're taking into account. And I think we can look at all these things and say, oh, we need a goal around that and that and that and that. And really what we try to do as a team is say, okay, how are these things connected? Because many of them are. And how can we look at trends and patterns and find connections so that we're making a few goals that people can really wrap their heads around that are going to have the greatest impact for some of these numbers that are of most concern for us. And so this is something that we developed early in our CIP process as our first step, just kind of wrapping our heads around where are we at right now and what are we most concerned about. And so I just wanted to highlight, I know it's not new information, but just highlight some of the data that we have that we are working to address in our current CIP.
From there, the next step of the process that we engaged in both at the district level and many of us in our own schools is looking at those problems of practice and brainstorming levers that we're going to pull to sort of change the trajectory in those particular areas. And a lot of that is brainstorming and talking about what can we do to address these specific problems. I was on a focus group, for example, at leadership meeting that was looking at high school graduation rate. And I chose that group because high school graduation rate is a system problem, not just a high school problem. But that group then looked at what are all of the things that are within our control that they can become actionable that would have an impact on high school graduation rate. And starting to form a theory of our most direct impact on some of these problems that we've identified in some of the data. And so we spent a lot of time sort of developing these theories of action that sort of the bridge between identifying the problem and the goals that we're going to write, because it sort of turns the problem into action and things that we can control and we can do. And so you'll see up there, we sort of formulated these in if-then statements. And so the theory being that if we perform an action, then here's a result that we think we will see in response to that action. And so on this slide and on the next slide, you'll see some examples of theories of action that were developed based on some of the problems that we shared in the previous slide.
So moving from our theory of action, we then take that brainstorming and that hypothesizing to really try to focus in on these SMART goals. I think you described it well, John, in terms of like, so how can we kind of package this, how can we make the connections, and how can we create some goals that we can hang a hook on, that we can communicate, that we can stand behind, that we can share with our communities, our teachers, our students, our families, the larger community, to really focus and drive our work. They're not inclusive of everything that we could possibly do. In some cases, they're very large, but they have specific actions underneath them that create small steps, ideally leading to big change. And so there were 3, maybe 4, main SMART goals that we came up with this year that we all felt strongly about working toward to support our students in our communities. So the first goal is increase our academic proficiency in literacy and in math, ELA, English Language Arts, literacy. So we hoped when we were developing this last spring that within a year, we would see 10% more students proficient, as measured by our VTCAP, our summative state assessment, as well as our benchmark assessments. And Stacy will present to you in a little bit why those are connected. And to give you kind of an anchor point, last spring, and we didn't actually have these numbers yet from the VTCAP, those were released in late July this summer. But when that data came back, when our students took that statewide assessment last spring, 54% of our students were proficient in literacy and 37% of our students were proficient in math. We felt pretty confident predicting these because they were pretty much hand in hand with what our benchmark results that we can see in real time were coming back as, and there's a pretty strong correlation between those 2 assessments. So we felt, given these rates, it was really important to boost literacy for all of our students. And when we say all, we don't just mean the students not on IEPs from high income households who are in a different subgroup. We're talking about all students raising and also trying to narrow our achievement gap or our opportunity gap by 10%. So, and we'll show you some examples of this, but instead of the gap getting wider, or maybe our all category decreasing their performance, so therefore the gap is narrower, really thinking about elevating the experience for everyone and trying to close that gap is the basis of our literacy and math work. The second main goal that we came up with was we wanted to really support more students graduating from our system, not just the high school, but our entire system, from our early education all the way up, thinking about all of our actions that support that. The most recent graduation results that we have from the state of Vermont, the AOE calculates that through a complex formula and sends that back to us, is that our 4-year graduation rate here in our system lagged the Vermont state average by 9%. So 9% fewer kids graduated from WSESU as they did in the state average. And the 6-year graduation rate lagged by about 4%. And so we really felt like we wanted to increase our graduation rates to exceed that state average. And then the third main goal we came up with was really to enhance student sense of belonging in our system. There are so many ways that we measure this, just like there's so many ways that we measure literacy and math performance. But a main measure that we have had now longitudinally over time is our climate survey results. And we were really looking at, instead of one specific question, a category of questions around sense of belonging. Last winter when students in our system took that, 66% of our 3rd through 5th graders responded favorably to that set of questions in the aggregate across the district, and 42% of our 6th through 12th graders responded favorably to questions in the sense of belonging category. And so we also wanted to increase that favorable response rate by 10%. So those were the 3 main kind of overarching umbrella goals that we felt were important that encompassed our problems of practice and our theory of action to drive our goals and our action plan. So we'd like to explain a little bit more about the data behind these and what hopefully it will look like when we are meeting these goals. So I'm going to turn over to Stacy to talk about these.
Perfect. So we're going to look at a bunch of different graphs in a minute, but before we dive into those graphs, I just want to give a little bit of information about assessments. We're looking at VTCAP data, which is a statewide assessment that students take at the end of the year, and our regular benchmark data that we administer in the district fall, winter, and spring. And it's important when we're talking about assessments to think about using multiple points of data when talking about student achievement, and not just one isolated assessment. And using those data points to track progress over time. So that was one piece. We'll go to the next slide. We're going to go into ELA literacy data. This is VTCAP, statewide assessment in ELA that shows the percent proficient. I want to point your attention over to the right-hand side of the slide where it talks about district-wide, we're 54%, and Bryn already mentioned there is correlation between the statewide assessment and those district benchmark assessments. So you can see our information about our other assessment system. We're referring to DIBELS here, which is other tools we have in our toolbox to assess students' ability to read proficiently. Looking at this graph, you can see the comparison between the 2023 results and 2024 by grade level. You might be tempted to look at, say, for instance, the grade 3 section and say, oh, from 1 year to the next, we went up by 2%. And I would just caution you that we're talking about two different groups of kids when you're looking at that particular graph of data. Third graders who are now currently in fourth grade in the 2024 assessment, if that makes sense. Is that making sense, what I'm saying there?
Yes, I think another way to say that is Stacy.
Yeah, I was gonna point or go up.
Yeah, so kids who took it in spring 2023 when they were in third grade, district-wide, 48% of our third graders in 2023 were proficient on that assessment. Now we're a year ahead in 2024, so these kids are now the fourth graders. So that particular cohort of students went from approximately 48% of them proficient on that assessment to 57% of them proficient. It jumps, if that makes sense. So we do look at, and it's not a perfect match cohort because kids move in and kids move out. But generally, when we're looking at numbers in the aggregate, and that is a benefit of being one of the larger districts in the state, that there is more validity in the data when we're looking in the aggregate. That's one way to look at these matched cohorts-ish. And then we also look at this.
Can I just ask to qualify that? So you're saying the 48%, oh, yes, is now reflected in fourth grade as 57?
Yeah,
not 51.
Correct. There was a group of students in 2023 who were in third grade, and 48% of those kids were proficient.
Okay.
And then assuming most of them stayed in our system, now in 2024, they're in fourth grade, and 57% of them were then proficient last spring.
Okay.
And there have only been 2 years of VTCAP inception. We've only been using the VTCAP. That's the assessment is chosen by the state AOE. We don't have a choice in that. I think a little bit tricky with the apples to apples comparison too, worth mentioning, is that in 2023 the assessment window was in mostly May and early June, driven by the state. In 2024 the assessment window started in March and had to be completed by mid-April. And that was statewide. Everyone was assessed in that same window, but a little tricky to have basically 6 weeks less instruction in some of our classrooms. Despite that, on the whole, we did see a 2% increase district-wide in the proficiency in that particular. And ELA is administered to students who are in 3rd through 9th grade only.
So just like Bryn was saying, the VTCAP 3rd through 9th grade, we know that we have to collect assessment data on other grade levels as well. So that's another reason why we have our benchmark assessment systems that really assesses students starting in kindergarten through 11th grade. And this shows some data for just the last school year. It shows fall, winter, and spring assessments. And you can see, I want to highlight the red box at the top is shrinking, which is a sign that we're going in the right direction. When you look at our percent proficients, those are also going in the right direction. However, the overall percent proficient is not where we would like them to be. So that's where we start to think about what is our problem of practice and what kinds of steps can we take to show improvement in that regard. VTCAP allows us to do some disaggregating our data into various different population groups. So you'll see on this chart, there's the blue bar is the percent proficient of all students. Then we have a category of students that are the orange next to it is students experiencing poverty. The gray bar, students of color, and the yellow bar is our students on IEPs. So you can start to see that opportunity gap that we've talked about before in terms of those different populations of students at various different grade levels. When we're talking about disaggregating data like this at the district level, the state will give us this data, but at the individual school level, what happens is the population sizes are so small that it becomes easy to identify which students we're talking about. So we don't necessarily have this level of data at the school level. That makes sense. Anything else? Again, just looking at the same data in a different way. Now we're looking at data across schools, and it would put out that UHS, only 9th graders are taking the VT cap in this data, so that's not reflective of all students at the high school.
I think something that we're always interested to look at is how are we doing, what are our trends over time, and also how are we compared to Vermont students in general. And unfortunately, just want to be clear that the statewide results are not yet released from the Agency of Education, so we can't present you with that comparison at this time. We have not yet seen it. Last year that was released in February. From the state AOE, we're hoping that the timeline will be a little bit shorter this year as well, but when we do have those comparison data, we'd be happy to share that, obviously with the board and the public, and hope to have that for the annual report. Probably is helpful to share that last year, in spring 2023, the Vermont state average was 52% of students were proficient on the literacy VT cap. So obviously there's variance here, but in general, we were around that same range, if not a little bit higher than the state average last year.
We're gonna switch gears, talk about math a little bit. The graphs will look similar, maybe slightly different colors. So again, VT cap percent proficiency comparing 2023 results to 2024 results. You'll notice the trends there. So same comments we said before about current third graders who were in 3rd grade in 2023, 4th graders at the end of 2024. You'll notice 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade are those critical grades that were in pre-K, kindergarten, 1st grade when school first shut down. So those grade levels, as we start to move them through, they're experiencing some of those early losses during that remote learning phase. Again, overall district-wide proficiency, if you noticed on the right-hand side, 37%. Again, similar graph that shows our benchmark data up from fall to spring. You can see the trends moving sort of in the right direction, slowly.
I think noteworthy when we crunched all of these data from across the district, while we want to work so hard to support students' math learning and the math that's happening in schools as well as literacy, in terms of our local common assessment plan, to have our benchmarks predicting with so much side-by-side correlation to what our state averages are ending up being, 37% and 38% here for math, give us a lot of faith in the local assessment systems that we have set up to be able to have more interim data to help us see and measure our learning, because VT cap just happens once a year, and you might have a stomach ache, or you might be in a bad mood, or you might be in a great mood, or you might have a passage that you're really passionate about. And so looking at that in a more discreetly and over time, and looking at our progress is really important than just that one VT cap assessment. But we're pretty excited that there's a close alignment to help us have some faith in our benchmarks that we're using here.
Again, math proficiency that's disaggregated by those same populations. So looking at different groups at different grade levels. We continue to be concerned by the size of the gap and would identify that as a problem of practice. And again, VT cap for math across schools.
Again, we don't have the statewide results yet. I can share that in 2023, the Vermont overall average was about 41% proficient, so we are lagging by about 4 percentage points this year. Again, we don't have those results. We were at 37% district-wide. I will say that in 2022, when we were still administering the SBAC district-wide, we were at 28% proficient. And in 2021, we were 30% proficient. So although we're nowhere near where we want to be, we are certainly making increases in our proficiencies since the immediate return from COVID.
Graduation rate. So we, as John mentioned earlier, we've discussed this at length during leadership meetings, just around how this is like pre-K through 12. It's kind of an issue, a thing that we're all working on to get students re-engaged in their learning so that they are able to feel successful and belonging and all the things that make them students within our classrooms. And so specific to BUHS, the few things I was going to mention are just that we started with a 4-year rotation with, it's a program called Aspirations that is put out through VSAC, and they select 2 schools a year that they are willing to work with. We were one of the lucky ones 2 years ago, and so we just completed year 1, which was kind of just looking at the data in our school, and so now we're moving into kind of what's next. And we're excited for that process. The purpose of Aspirations is that every student graduates with a plan. It's not every student goes to college, which I think is where we've been missing the mark, and that's been a lot of the conversations, and less than 50% of our students go to college, so that sense of belonging piece, what about us? We're realizing that's been a big missing piece, and so we're really focused on that work. We also have developed what's called the Access Hub, and it's kind of tier 2 supports within the building to engage our students who are really still struggling from getting re-engaged since COVID or for whatever reasons. And it's, it's smaller group instruction and kind of space to go with a trusted adult to be able to figure out how can I be successful within the classroom walls. And so those are the few things we're doing at the high school right now to address this. And then, again, this is where we learned the other data. This is put out by the state, and this is the newest graduation rates for the 4-year graduation rates at 60%.
Yeah, I think it's important to note if we have cohorts around, it's easy to say like, 9% gap, that's not that big. If we have a cohort around 200 students, which our cohorts generally are averaging, when we are lagging 9%, it means 20 fewer students on average are graduating from BUHS than the average high school in Vermont. So that's what that looks like in terms of numbers of the kids who are in our buildings. And so really talking about this plan of like, okay, so how do we really reach those students and make a difference in their lives?
And obviously the 6-year one is a closer rate. Somebody asked at the last meeting what that means, and for a lot of times this is like students who were disengaged as 9th or 10th graders and realized as an 11th grader, oops, I'm so far behind, do I leave or do I stick it out and do a little longer? And that's typically so the good news is they're sticking it out and doing it a little longer, and that I think is a good representation of the fact that we're trying and they're wanting to be here, and hopefully we're coming out on the other side of that and getting a stronger 4-year graduation rate.
Okay, back to third goal, enhancing our students' sense of belonging, really the most important one in my opinion. Again, it starts with collective efficacy. If we believe in our kids and they know that we believe in them and they see it and feel it every day, all of those other slides that we saw are going to be impacted in a positive way. Kids can read adults like nobody else, and they know if you're faking it, and they know if you believe in them. And this is really important work. And there is a little bit of a science to it, not like teaching math and literacy, and we're engaging in programs to do that work. But But front and center, first and foremost, this is really the most important goal, which sets up success for the academic goals. So aside from academics, obviously we need to invest in the well-being of our students. We need to teach them, we need to give them tools on how to navigate not only school, but life in general. We are in the human business. We believe that every day is an opportunity to change lives. This year when we welcomed new teachers to our school system, we gave each of those staff members, I should say, a pen to kind of set the tone for their experience. And on this green pen, what it says is WSCSU, educating students, changing lives. So it's just a pen, but I think the message is really strong. Like, you just joined an organization with an opportunity to change lives day in and day out. So at the end of the day, I think most educators get into education because they love children, and we need to foster that through continuous professional development and support, and so that our educators are successful in working with their students. So taking a look at some data here, here's some trends of sense of belonging data dating back to the spring of 2021 up to last winter. A couple things I just want to point out. Spring of 2021, that was the first year that school was open after the COVID shutdown. So the 2021 spring year essentially consisted of a hybrid approach to school. Most of our kids, all of our kids, had some element of remote learning in 2020, 2021. And some of our kids had experiences in in-person learning. Starting in the fall of 2021, that was really our first year from the pandemic back to what we would call somewhat normal. All students were back in their schools. This is where we saw, and it was reported widely from the fall to the spring, cross grade level student conflict. Students hadn't been together in the way they were in quite some time. So I think the data reflects that there. Fall of 2022 and spring of 2023, that was the second year of all students back in their buildings. So essentially second year of some normalcy from COVID. And then most recently, our latest climate data is of the last winter, which shows 66% percentage of sense of belonging. And I think that hopefully that trend is heading in the right direction. Some things to note about the 70% in 2021, it was such a unique year. We had classrooms of like 6 kids with 3 teachers. We had a majority of kids at home behind computer screens. Like, there just wasn't engagement with each other. So I think there was a lack of sense of belonging with not being in our schools, but also there was some comfort in when I am in the school, I have all the support, like essentially 1 teacher to every 2 kids support. So it's interesting to think about the varying dynamics from each school year and how that shows in our data. The next slide, I'm not going to read the questions to you, but you can see starting in the winter of 2024, we're starting to get positive rates of change in the children grades 3 through 5. So 9, yeah. Next slide, similar to, same slide as the 3 through 5, this is 6 through 12 students. Again, 2021 was the hybrid school year. At the high school, the model that we had in place at the high school was essentially, if you were an in-person student, you went to school 1 day a week. And that was, my kids experienced that. So I saw that firsthand, how that impacted teenagers. and being away from their friends and not able to engage with them at the school level. So then we see in the fall of 2021, everybody's so excited to start school, to get back into our buildings. But again, the priority of these school years, which I think is reflected in the academic data, was safety measures, precautions, protocols, checking in, staying 3 feet behind your friend in line, going to your box in the classroom. I mean, it was a vastly different experience, and the educator's role, first and foremost, was on COVID measures and safety. Instruction certainly was a priority, but safety came first. There's a lot of anxiety and worry about what we had just experienced and were experiencing as humans. 2022, 2023, it's our second year of in-person, more clarity around safety measures. Masks were optional. We saw students and staff wearing masks, many choosing not to. It was great. And we started to see things steady out a little bit, certainly not the increases in sense of belonging we want to see during that school year, but things started to mellow a little bit, and I think we had that experience at the middle and high schools. And then in the winter of last school year, we see another, our third year of in-person education, all students in the building, sharing the hallway, sharing the classrooms. Again, we see another bump, a small bump, but a bump in that feedback. And again, the hope is that's much greater as we navigate this school year. Again, next slide, a breakdown of those questions. 4 out of the 5 questions, we saw an increase in percentage, lower percentages than at the grades 3 through 5, but increases nonetheless. And then as we move to the next slide, this slide reflects what our hope is based on the CIP that we're reviewing tonight as a group. So the blue represents where we currently rate, and then the orange represents if we meet our goals at the end of the school year, what our data would look like. So from literacy VCAP, we would ideally go from 54% to 64%. Math, 37 to 47. Again, not where we want to be ultimately, but a 10% increase, that's what we're hoping to see. 4-year graduation rate, 74 to 84. 6-year, 82, that would be to 92. And then again, overall sense of belonging from 66% at the elementary to 76, middle to high school, 42 to 52. Again, not where we want to land ultimately, but really working towards that 10% increase in creating that culture within our school system, that level of accountability. This is the goal. We need to get there. Let's think about the moves we're making every day to get there, not only in academics, but also in what our social emotional work is looking like on a day in and day out basis. So when we're meeting in June and doing a reflection, this is the hope if we haven't met our CIP goals.
Okay, so we have some lofty goals. I'm going to talk a little bit about how are we going to get there. So we have our 4 goals, and we needed to develop some action items for those. So this is a screenshot actually of some of our work at our board admin retreat in June that showed a little bit of the process, and we're gonna just talk through some of the steps that we went through to develop the action items that we chose. So the first thing that we did is in early June, our leadership team brainstormed some action items that would support the CIP goals that we talked about. So that was, the leadership team working together, thinking about what things, the culmination of the process so far would be most impactful for each of the goals that we had talked about. And then those were shared at our 6/18 board admin retreat. The action items, this is, if you recall, getting handed a bunch of stickers by Bryn and everybody going around and voting on what are the action items that that you think would be most impactful for student learning. And that was a time where all ideas were on the table, and people could add ideas to the list that we had developed, and also use stickers as a way to figure out where are we thinking we're going to have the biggest impact for our kids as a whole group. And so you can see kind of that working document there that noted the different vote totals for some of the action items. So we reviewed that collectively as a group, and then use that to vote on action items, and then compile that into our CIP, which was shared with the AOE in late June, and that was approved. And I think it's important to note that the actions they're differentiated based on school sites, and you'll see that in a little bit. We have a couple slides that Mary's going to talk about, sharing what that's looking like at different schools for the beginning of the year right now for each school, but that collectively these are the things that we are working towards. And then the last step is monitoring and adjusting that over the course of the year, which Bryn will talk about in a little bit as well. So this is just the process that we use to come up with our actions for each of the CIP goals. And then the next slide is not super tiny print, but I did print out packets if board members would like hard copies. And what we did is we took each of the action items and categorize them here under each of the goals, and then have the measures in the right-hand column that are matched to those action items that we chose. And something new this year, really there's 4 slides. So this is the ELA slide, there's a similar slide for math, and you'll see that in your packet, and a similar slide for graduation rate, and a similar slide for sense of belonging. So there's action items for each of our goals. And it's a lot to keep track of. And so we were thinking, how do we really make sure that we're holding all of these pieces over the course of the year? We're not like dropping pieces. And so what we chose to do at our summer admin retreat was for each member of the leadership team who's not a school principal, because the principals are focused on our district CIP, but also their school-based CIP. So for some of us that are like coaches and coordinators to pick up a little bit of the load, and to actually sign up for tracking a couple of these action items over the course of the year. So I am responsible for thinking about master schedules and making sure that we have these times allocated in master schedules for literacy and math. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily making everyone's master schedule. I'm not. That sounds terrible. But I can make a quick survey, or I can ask for all the principals to send me a link to their master schedules, and then I can just analyze it and say, okay, do we have all the times needed for teaching literacy and math and all the intervention times? Are those built in? Are we good? Did we do that? So everybody is holding a piece of the CIP goals and the action items to make sure that we're not dropping balls, because there's just a lot here. So that's something that I'm excited about, and I think it's going to help us really keep this, this is a standing item on our monthly leadership team meeting. We just talked about it last Friday and had a time to check in, okay, where is everybody at with their CIP, and where are
how are we doing as stewards of these action items? Remember what you signed up for in July? What have you done for that? And so it's just a good touch point every month to keep this at the forefront of our minds.
So, I think Whitney launched into this idea of really monitoring and adjusting our CIP both month to month as we are carrying out our goals, but also getting feedback from our stakeholders, because it's a living process. It's not, as I mentioned in the beginning, not just published and then it's drafted and it's done, right? It's a continual process, and by the time we're really implementing it, it's going to be spring again when we're looking and revising and looking at new data. I think also important to talk about here is that it's not just at one point of year that we receive all of these data, right? Data rolls in from different assessments and different things that we're looking at continuously, and we adjust as needs warrant. So some ways that we really think about doing that monitoring and adjusting process in order to think about these incremental small changes that ideally lead to a big impact for our students. We really think about gathering feedback. So we want feedback from all of the board members from our 3 boards in this room. And we have several working committees where we're gaining feedback and working collaboratively on things. That happens informally, links are shared, we share the CIP, we get feedback as well. Feedback happens at leadership council meetings, where principals are talking with stakeholders who are helping to govern the schools, and also potentially family engagement groups or PTOs to get feedback. And so importantly, our staff and our students and the wider family community to share what's happening. I've seen many principals send communication over the summer that said, welcome back families, here are our CIP goals for our school this year, this is what we're working on. And so it's super clear. And then there's an invitation for feedback around that and a promise to continue the communication channel to talk about how it's going throughout the school year. So feedback is very important to the process. Just like in our instruction, one size does not fit all, and neither does our CIP. As you saw in some of our graphs that we shared earlier, different schools are at different places on this journey for different measures. And so each school principal really takes the continuous improvement plan and works with their leadership team and their teachers and their student leaders at their site to make the plan work for them. We have umbrella goals, but we want that to really be focused on the individual communities and needs that we serve. So we also want to, as I mentioned, monitor and adjust that. And so administrators are doing that as we look at data, and we do that work month to month. Teachers look at data. Certainly 3 times a year we have data meetings formally in every school site, but I know teachers are looking at data in team meetings and on a daily basis as well to see how students are doing and how to adjust. And Whitney mentioned the stewards that we have for our CIP plan as well, to really have an accountability buddy and hold each other to continually driving the work. As I'm sure all of our lives are, things get really busy and there's a lot of balls in the air, and it's easy to forget about something that you said you're gonna do because other pressing needs come forward. And so we're really trying to mix that into our CIP process this year to support each other and to push each other to really meet our goals. So we really take a look at what worked and what's not working. John was sharing the theories of action. Sometimes we miss. Sometimes we think, hey, if we really do this, it's gonna have this impact. And then we're like, oops, it didn't. And so then we try again, just like the students in our classrooms. And then we think also importantly about how do we improve our process moving forward. In my couple years in this role in the district, we've certainly made a much more concerted effort to get stakeholder feedback from many iterations of the process and to be very driven month to month to month to continue this process of developing the CIP. And there's so much room to do better, and I think there's a lot of room there to invite more diversity of the voices at the table as well. So that's something that we're looking at in terms of continually improving our process of making the continual improvement plan as well. So we will continue the work this year and next spring and next year, and the cycle will continue.
We'll jump into one example of how a CIP is rolled out in a school. I'm going to share how that looked like at Oak Grove, and then what you see on the slides here is kind of that what we have in place to keep us in check and make sure we're doing what we need to do to make progress within our own schools. And so each school has listed what their plan will be between our last admin meeting and our next admin meeting. working so that, it's always important to hold ourselves accountable to do the work, and our team really helps hold each other accountable. So at Oak Grove, as was mentioned earlier, this is a continuous improvement plan. So we are continuously working with this document, both at the district level and within our own sites. So last year, at the end of the year, we had our end of the year benchmark meetings. It was a great time to look at the data and really think about how we did with our 23-24 goals. And then I personally also took feedback that I got through my 360 evaluation and some staff feedback. And there was a need for a clear vision, and it was a perfect opportunity to create a vision statement within the school and then link that to our upcoming CIP. And so that's how the rollout started at Oak Grove. We reflected on the progress that we made over the course of the year, and then went into the summer. At our admin retreat in July, we had the opportunity to sit down and really look at where we were as individual schools as well as at a district, and create and think about what kind of action steps would we want to bring back to our own schools. And then we had beautiful templates that were available to all of us as principals, and it really helped guide our work in how we share this information with our staff. So on the opening day, when we returned back to school, that was the focus of what we were talking about. And really, specific to Oak Grove, and I'm sure every principal would agree, that there is a sense of urgency around our CIP goals, and really this need to push our students and our staff to believe in the work that we do and to believe in our students and their capabilities. And that was reflected both in the CIP and in the Oak Grove vision for this year. We had an opportunity at the beginning of the year to share out the current data. So we did have access to our VTCAP scores, and those were shared with staff. And it was a really good jumping off point to say, here's where we are, and here's the work that we need to do. And then we went into reviewing what the CIP goals were for this upcoming year and the action steps that would be specific to Oak Grove School in my case. And that was an opportunity for conversation, discussion, if there were thoughts or concerns. But it was a good starting place. And as with anything, that is continuous. As we move throughout the year, if there are adjustments that need to be made, they certainly will be made within our leadership teams, within our grade level teams, within committees, leadership councils, all of those things. And so it's good to keep all of that in mind and think about all of the stakeholders as we move forward in the school year. And then as we continue all sites, you'll see again our steps moving forward, and we will we will continue to think about our priorities month by month and what makes sense to do in order at each of our individual sites, and that helps us move forward as a whole school system. And finally, I'll just keep going. It's important, and it comes up in almost every team meeting. We've had common plannings across all grade levels now that we've had on Monday at Oak Grove, and I have to say the commitment to our students and to looking at data and to focusing on what our students can do and building upon that has been very apparent. And just accolades to teachers for really taking on this heavy work and for doing it and for working hard, digging in, and not being afraid. Keeping that at the forefront and coming back to it all of the time and continuing to grow is the purpose of a CIP.
All right, that was a lot of information. So we're gonna take a minute to do a quick protocol. I think, I wonder. So I'd like to give you a few minutes to think about all of the things, information we just shared. Maybe you've jotted some questions, some notes. This has our district mission statement and also those same 4 CIP goals on the slide. So just take a minute to think about what you see, what you think, what you wonder, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to turn and talk with an elbow partner in just a minute.
Great.
Yes. So just like a minute to do some thinking. And then when you're ready, you can go ahead and turn and talk to an elbow partner.
I know this very well, so go ahead and talk. Yes.
Someone's got it.
I get a little confused.
And how Thanks. Everyone, does anyone want to have a quick share out about a conversation you and the folks you were talking about? And then Mark's gonna walk us through a little closure. We'll just do a couple shares if anyone wants to do that. Kim, do you want to share ours?
Kim, are you just volunteering yourself?
Okay, great. Okay, now you're volunteering. Now I gotta do her words. Can someone help us talk through the difference between the 4-year graduation rate and the 6-year graduation rate? Well, we're very happy to have the 4-year rate skyrocket. If kids move from 4 to 6, what's the impact on the 4?
And we know we don't want to double dip the kids, but is the kids moving to the 6-year, is that a negative impact on the 4-year that we're seeing?
How does that work?
I don't have an answer.
That's a valid answer.
But those are the kind of questions that we have to ask as we go deeper and deeper to refine the system. I mean, ultimately, I would say, as long as our overall graduation rate is continuing to increase, that might be, an unexpected consequence that we'd see initially. And wanted to track that and dig deeper at the student level. Yeah, we don't have the spring 24 results yet either from the state, but as soon as we do, we can take a look at those. See what's good.
Well, why don't we go to the next slide to provide some more thinking time in terms of reflections and questions, and then topics for conversation, because that is the final slide of the evening. Before that final slide, here's just kind of the equation. And I hope it's clear to everyone that we have clear goals and that we have a plan to implement those goals. Again, as I stated from the beginning, I'm very proud of our school system and the systems that we have developed to support our students anchored in data. So bottom 3, there's a data plan, there's a professional development plan. Our data plan consists of a local assessment plan. We refer to benchmark meetings and progress monitoring opportunities. And the data that we have collected over the years through our local assessment very much are in line with the VCAP assessment data as well. So very powerful tool that has been created and developed over many years and adapted over the years. But to have an assessment plan so closely linked to the results of the state assessment is what a powerful tool that we can use in terms of how we make decisions around intervention and opportunities for enrichment throughout the school year. Second one, professional development plan. We do have a very clear professional development plan. Some of the challenges that we have, as I spoke about in the beginning, is turnover, and then balancing how we support new teachers as well as veteran teachers at the same time. One way we can do that is anchoring that professional development on a curriculum implementation. And as you know, we're implementing new literacy and math curriculums, and we've been steadfast in providing professional development opportunities to learn about how to engage with those curriculums and teach them. And then finally, thinking to the spring in policy G8 and evolution of CIP plans. In February, we will have a summit similar to this. However, the data we'll be sharing will be real live data that we have in February. So we'll be able to see the growth or the results of the work from today till February. Post-February, and looking towards the spring, last year we had a leadership team consisted of board members and admin that met regularly to develop the board admin retreat. I see potentially kind of a similar infrastructure coming to place after that February benchmark meeting to do some similar work around thinking ahead to professional development for this group in June, but also to weigh in on potential CIP goals for 25-26. So I see that as a committee coming together. And then finally, at the end of the school year in June, another third summit presentation like this, where we'll see real live results from the whole school year. So we'll be able to reflect on where we were in September, growth we made to February, here's how we landed at the end of the year, and hopefully make a connection to here's how our goals for the next school year to start the new cycle. So that's how I see us moving forward, which is similar to a lot of the work we've already done last school year in terms of collaboration of this group. So that being said, we can open it up to questions, comments, conversation topics that we either engage in now or at future meetings down the line. But I know there was a turn and talk. Are there other specific questions or comments to share that we can capture in the notes or engage in together as a school community? Ruby?
I thank you very much. That was really extremely informative presentations. And a question I have, over the past year, we saw presentations around, I think, some innovative initiatives like dual enrollment. And I think that they were exciting to hear about. When I look at the data trends and particularly graduation rates, I just wonder at what point do you look at initiatives and what impacts they're having? And as you said, Brand, there's times when you think, okay, if we do this, it'll have this effect. And sometimes, you can have all of the hope in the world, it might not be the right fit for whatever reason. And so, so I just wonder about both dual enrollment is on my mind, and then also we've had some curriculum changes that, some significant ones. So I just wonder if you can speak to what evaluative process you go through, and cyclically, how long does it take? We can't expect we implemented it last year, it's not working this year, get out of it. That would be a disaster. So what's the cycle that we go through?
I think I hear two different things, and I remember the excellent presentation last year inspiring around dual enrollment. I think we keep data at a micro level, so it's kind of two answers. And then we also look at trends over time too, right? So for example, in the dual enrollment, I remember Kathy and also Rhonda sharing.
So the flexible pathways.
The flexible pathways in the dual enrollment in terms of reaching that, what kind of impact that's had over the years. And so individual departments, individual teams are tracking those data over time that ideally are then rolling up into these big umbrella things. So absolutely we keep that specific to the program or the department over time. In terms of the curricular impacts, a lot of the research that I've seen is it really takes about 5 years of implementation of a new curriculum to A, be fully implemented, and B, to really see the full effects of what has that had on students. And so we also need to measure the impact of our new curriculum, as well as to what extent is it fully being implemented in our classrooms, because there's a learning curve as well there for our teachers. This is really year 2 to 3 that we've done our new math and literacy curriculum. So my quick answer to that is I'm expecting that we're gonna start to see some of those trends show up this year. Not the full potential, but we'll start to see some of those trends, especially as we've made a commitment to implement the curriculum as intended to the greatest extent possible across all of our classrooms and schools, and all of the administrators have agreed to that and are communicating that to their staff. But on a more micro level, it looks like, well, what did the unit test look like for my students? I was teaching these skills, how did they do? and an even more micro level. It's like, okay, I taught this lesson today, and here was a quick exit ticket, and did they understand what assembly was or not? Because it's all of these tiny incremental steps that really lead up to that change. So I don't have like a quick answer, but I think they're all things that we're paying attention to, both on the small level, and then looking at how does that roll up to some of these bigger summative evaluations that we've shared tonight.
And the importance of feedback. On Friday, we had a full day admin meeting. We started that meeting inviting a group of 12 teachers who are part of the EL implementation team. And they spent the first hour presenting work that they're excited about in terms of teacher leadership, and then also expectations they have and want of administration to support the development and growth of that curriculum. So that's not hard data, but that's an example of collecting feedback and some aha moments of, okay, that makes sense. Let's adjust that in our plan as well.
I think this was a fantastic presentation. I really appreciate it. I do recognize that it is somewhat toward the 9th hour of continuous improvement and goal identification. And yet I wonder if there would be utility in administration considering a financial continuous improvement and goal. Given the current financial situation we're in, this district, our state is in, if there might be, like I said, utility in setting forth a goal as we go into budgetary planning season, that we maintain the high quality education that we have here and either look to reduce or maintain the budget. Just a thought.
Walter?
Yeah, thanks for the very good presentation. Just a couple quick questions on graduation. Someone mentioned that less than 50% of WSESU students go off to college post-graduation. Does the state provide benchmark data on what the average number of students graduating from our state high schools go off to college versus something else?
I'm not sure, but I could definitely look into it.
Hey, I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, certainly coming from Vernon with school choice, if there's a 10th grade kid at BUHS and they move to South Burlington, where do they show up on somebody's graduation rate? Or if we have 10 kids in Pioneer Valley in Massachusetts, do they show up anywhere as strictly students that stay in the district?
Definitely don't know the answer to that question, but good questions to.
I would guess that any student I would guess would be a registered student to the high school in Vermont. So Pioneer Valley students would not, like any Vernon students going there would be on the Mass.
That's what I was wondering. So it is a group of our students that we don't have data on.
I mean, you could probably get it, but.
Right, thanks.
We can look into that though.
We can confirm that.
Similar for students who, in terms of their state assessment data, typically students from a tuition town who are attending an independent school where tuition dollars are paying for that would still take the assessment data, and that would be linked back to our system. As long as they took that at that institution, but I'm assuming if the student was at a school in Massachusetts, there is no BT cap in Massachusetts. So yeah, it's a little fuzzier there, but we'll look into that more detail.
Tim?
Yeah, I have too many questions and comments to raise tonight, and I'd like to sleep on it and think about this. I'm sure I'm not alone. What I plan to do is send them through my chair to you to consider.
Sure.
But I'll just bring up one. In the very beginning, why didn't we start with last year's CIP to see which goals we met or didn't meet? One of the goals you'll remember last year was that students in IEPs will attend at least 80% of their classes in general education classes. We also had goals of 10% increase in the EL and math. Did we meet those goals? I thought in the very beginning, back at the retreat, I was surprised that we didn't even begin with, this is where we were last year with our CIP, and this is what we met and didn't meet. And I'm concerned about Greg.
We shared that in the
don't
618
recall.
retreat, but we can reshare that slideshow to everyone. Yeah.
Last year's CIP?
Yeah. Each of the goals
Okay.
and how we did.
I missed it, there's so much.
That's when we had the conversation about whether we stuck with 10% or went to 5 because we looked at the data from last year and we didn't quite meet we didn't get to the 10%, and so we had that conversation about, like, do we lower it to 5% for this year, or do we keep it at 10, kind of like we want to be reaching?
And did we meet the 80% IEP?
At the elementary level, we did. At the secondary level, we did not. At the pre-K level, we did.
Okay. Just one, at our last regular board meeting, WSED, I asked you if the board would, if the administration would entertain additional goals. You said yes, we would. So I hope that that's still true, that additional goals will be entertained. We talked at length about health and safety of our students. The AOE strongly recommends that health and safety be included in the CIP, specifically, not embedded in other things. But we don't yet have a goal to address health and safety with measurements like incident reports, Title IX violations, specific concrete data like that.
Thanks for the suggestion. Yeah.
So, you know, I sit and look at the demographic of all of us sitting in this room. And the fact that fewer than 50% of students go on to college, which does not match the demographic in this room. What does it look like? Maybe you said it already, I'm sorry, but what does it look like on a, can I see it, on a statewide basis? What does it look like on a statewide basis?
Yeah, I think that's the question that Walter asked.
I'm sorry,
It's okay.
sorry.
I don't have
Right.
the data.
Yeah, okay.
But we can look into
We
it.
both
Yeah.
wrote it down.
And, okay, and so if we have this measurement that fewer than 50% go on to college, what are the rest of these students doing as they graduate? Are we tracking them?
So that's where that's where the work is right now. So that's what we're digging into, you know, are we going straight into the job force? Are we going to two-year colleges, community colleges? Are we going to on-the-job trainings? Are we going to tech schools? Are we going into the military? Like, creating opportunities for students to have a sense of, like, here's the purpose that's gonna get me to this place that I wanna go, versus just like, everyone's going to college. Because that's, I think, as a school, we've decided that's where we went wrong.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. Everyone is not going on college,
Yeah.
nor should that be
Yeah.
the goal. But I think about sitting with students in the high school and at times hearing, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't wanna do this, I don't wanna do that, and that is of grave concern, that they're not coming out of the gate energized in some way. Yeah, okay, just a comment. Okay, thank
We're
you.
doing a ton of work around that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And just, if I may add, so this is the local annual performance report for 2022-23 from the AOE. It has a lot of, I'll send it out to the board members, but one stat that really stuck out was special ed students, only 58% graduate. That's remarkably low. And if you look at VT CAP scores, my God, they are not learning math and English. 22% meet proficiency level. So we really have to focus on IEP and special ed students in a big way. Yet that's not big enough in our goals, I think. It's not specific enough. And then there's a nationwide issue about chronic absenteeism. This is September. Students who, a recent study I read showed that if students miss 2 classes in September, they're likely to miss 10% or no, 10 classes for the rest of the year, which means they don't get credit for that class, chronic absenteeism. Well, we could look at graduation rates, but we have to look at chronic absenteeism in first year, second year, third year. We have to look at the dropout rate from second year to third year. We really have to get serious about this data, because those students who drop out, we know what's going to happen to them, what the likelihood of incarceration, teen pregnancy, health issues. students who don't graduate with a high school diploma are likely not to do very well in society. So these are serious issues. And I just don't see it reflected in those 3 goals that we have.
And Tim, I'll just share for BUHS, one of our goals for this year is to increase the percentage of 9th through 11th grade students earning 28 or more credits in the 24-25 school year will increase by 10%. So that's looking at all of our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders and making sure that they're finding success in getting credit so that they're moving forward in the grade, not just in name, but in credit. And so that's where we're really focusing on that work. And I think the STAR data that is new to BUHS and is now is district-wide, that data is gonna help us carry those students through. We have an afternoon meeting tomorrow to look at all of our STAR data, because all students were assessed last week to see what are the pull-out groups that need to happen, where in each classroom do we need additional support. And so that's.
And Hannah, long ago, if the board had given the whole session to discussing chronic absenteeism and graduation rates alone, without all this other information we've received tonight, if we focused on that, we could have fruitful discussions, I think. But we've never had a focused discussion on each of these goals.
I think, just a quick point, I agree with what you're saying in terms of the importance of all these goals, Tim. I want to reiterate that a lot of the work in these overarching goals is in the specific action items. So for example, in terms of supporting students with graduation rates, it's better utilizing our warning systems that are identifying who's absent, who's cutting class, so targeting and looking at our academic students who are struggling and making quick and sorry, it's been a long day, deep interventions in terms of supporting them is part of that granular size of the specific actions that we're taking that ideally lead up to these overarching goals. And I agree with you completely about really supporting our students on IEPs. It's a conversation that we have every month. I do want to say too that I personally believe that our overarching goals absolutely are supporting students with IEPs, because supporting excellent core instruction and supporting engagement in our classrooms is what prevents students from falling further behind their peers or having some of these learning difficulties that compound over time. And it's making sure that we have these layers of instruction, so strengthening our instruction so all students are more proficient, closing our gaps so we don't have as large gaps with our IEP populations, are also supporting exactly, I think, what our common goal is, what I hear you saying. And it's those micro steps that we are taking to look at that over time that leads to these overarching umbrella goals. So I do want to just share that improving instruction for all students is an essential piece of, and I'm sure special educators in here can speak about that better than I can, to making sure that all of our students are reaching their full potential, and we're supporting that.
And can I just add to that before we move on? I also want to acknowledge that it is not a VUHS problem to solve, that this is something that I think we as elementary and middle school principals are also committed to supporting, and that sense of belonging at elementary school, early childhood, is really important, and that sets the foundation. And so it all falls on the backs of our high school administrators, but really we all have to carry this weight and support our students all the way through. And so having a sense of belonging goal in all of our schools is really vital, and tracking attendance data and tardiness data and looking for those trends as early as possible is really where it starts. And so I think that we are all in this to support the graduation rate from our school district, because it's important. As an elementary school principal, I want to see Oak Grove kids graduate and walk across the stage, and that is why we do this. That's the ultimate goal. And so I just want to be mindful that Hannah should not have to defend, not that she is on the spot here, but we all need to support all of our kids, and looking at the data that supports everybody. And that's why our goals are so broad and inclusive, I would say. It's because it has to address everybody.
Very, very often, when an efficiency expert comes in to assess personnel and workload, I know in my institution, we were surprised that the report was that we were lightweight with deans and advisors. Nothing changed, but, so if we did not have financial constraints, if it was your world, wish list, blue sky it, do you have enough personnel to do this work?
Are you asking me?
No, it was a.
I didn't know if you were looking at Bryn or at me.
No, I'm not, oh, I'm just looking
Okay.
about the space. Do you have enough, or are you lacking? If we didn't have this tension about the budget?
I believe we have plenty of supports in place to do the work and to meet these goals.
Okay.
I really do.
Okay.
I think we've developed really tried and true systems. We have the data to track that. We're coming out of some very serious challenges. But I wouldn't put something in front of everybody here if I didn't believe in it and feel like we had the people and the systems to do the work. Absolutely believe we do.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a reference back to what Mary just said about the cohesiveness of all the principals working together to try to achieve the goals that the whole district envisions. And the amount of energy and resources that goes into that is impressive. So I just think she hit it on the nail.
I feel very lucky to be on this team.
Brian, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because I saw somewhere in the data, I think, hope I'm not wrong, that the tech center, students at the tech center rated highest in terms of school belonging and connection. So maybe this is a bigger answer, but do you have a quick explanation of how that happened, what they're doing, and what they're doing that might be applicable at other schools?
Unfortunately, Nancy couldn't join us tonight, but
I have that answer.
You do?
During COVID, they went to school 4 days a week instead of 1. They had all of that time to keep going because you can't do carpentry over the internet.
The other thing I would say is I would imagine that a lot of those students are really connected to a future job, a future profession, and they can see themselves in the workforce on day one when they graduate the tech center.
Is it allowed to speak if you're a public?
Yes.
So one of the things I think about, and I've been thinking about how connected everything we've talked about today is civic duty, learning how to cooperate civilly, learning how to dialogue, having hope for your future. I think there's huge connections in our grades and how hopeful we are. There's a whole bunch of research on happy brains, and happy brains work better than any other kind of brain. And so I think everything that I'm hearing today is about community and building a really strong community so that we can have our students doing the best work that they can do. And so, yeah, so I'm just putting in a plug for, civics, debate, learning how to dialogue, and learning how to do that politely, and improving our kindness scores. So.
I think that starts really young, and we have a mixed delivery model in early childhood here, so it's trickier to formulate goals and action plans around this, but I was in a partner program this morning observing a student, and it was a 3-year-old classroom, and some kids they were getting ready for snack, and some kids were toileting, and there was like a teacher's in the bathroom, and then there was like this loud and kind of confusing yell in there. We weren't sure if there was something bad going on. It was a teacher. And then she says, so-and-so just put his shirt on for the first time. And the kid runs out in the classroom and is like, arms are up, right? And everybody is cheering for this child. The students, the teachers, and that is developing a sense of belonging. And that's what we're trying to filter right through the school system, right through the ages. It was just like a beautiful moment of where it starts. So I don't know, I've just been sitting on that little story and it just fits in right here with sense of belonging and community.
But Brandon, it makes me think of cheering along goals, and I think I'm really connecting to what you were saying, Sean, about observing that the cohesion of the admin team and working toward these goals. And it's not just the admin team, it's all of us sitting around this table, and you all as board members and everyone who is touching the schools to, I mean, hopefully you are in support of these goals where we want to increase academic achievement and a sense of belonging and the graduation rate for all of our students, and being able to feel that support from our boards in terms of supporting our work is so essential to the very hard work that happens in schools. And so thank you, hopefully, for your support of these and this work. And we can feel when that's there, and we can feel when maybe that's not there. And I know that it's that feeling of support and looking at the good and also the hard and the ugly, but doing that work together to support our students that I think is so important and keeps us committed. So thank you for this opportunity.
So is there anything else that we should address this evening?
No, I will just share a tremendous sense of appreciation for this work tonight and coming together in a summit format like this, and appreciate your support. I referenced it in the beginning. You know, we have a really strong history of passing budgets that support students and teachers in schools, and really proud of that, and appreciate the support from our current school boards and historically from our boards, which many of you are on previous boards. So I think it's a nice way to kick off the school year. It's getting late, but thank you. And I look forward to the continued work in the future.
So, Walter. I think this has been a really successful evening of all the boards coming together.
I agree. In our conversations over here with the Windham folks, you know, we were talking about it's good for, sometimes Vernon feels like we're just little Vernon down near Massachusetts, and there are lots of things happening up here in Brattleboro with the WSCSD. So I do feel these interactions and all of us seeing the presentation and being able to hear what other questions have come up and the answers that have come up is very, very important. Yeah, so for thinking about the idea of the summit, I think it's a great idea. I appreciate it.
I think this has been a highly successful evening, and I'm looking forward to the next time we get together to share this kind of information. I think it's makes for efficiency,
Yes.
and energy, and having a meal together and chatting. I think it's been really successful. Thank you.
Collective efficacy.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, there being no further business before these boards, I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of all the boards, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned at 8:38 this evening.